in particular in America, has had a very important role in highlighting certain issues. We've got to a stage where the owners of some NFL teams are referring to their own staff as prisoners. This is all on the back of a sustained period of protest launched largely by Colin Kaepernick. And that's one issue. The other issue that's going on in the moment in global sport is the issue of equality and equal pay, in particular for female athletes. I'm delighted to say we've got one of the most renowned advocates for equal pay, a legend of a player, and now it turns out a bit of a legend as an activist as well. Please give it up for Hope Solo. Hiya.
Hi.
Welcome.
Thank you.
How's it going?
Good. How are you?
So, I was just saying a little bit earlier on, this is like the 1 year anniversary of Donald Trump. We were actually all at the Web Summit this time last year when the news came through that Donald Trump was going to be the president of the US, and there was a lot of tension. I'm not going to deny it. There was a lot of trepidation about what was coming next. As an American, a year on, how do you feel the current situation? What do you think about how the country's going at the moment?
You know, it's sad. I think there's a lot of people aren't feeling too great in America about where the country is headed. Just recently, I wore an anti-Trump shirt throughout Europe, and I posted a couple pictures online, and I can't believe how much hate there was for the fact that I used my First Amendment right to wear whatever I want to wear, and then I got pummeled by many Americans who are for Trump. So for me, it's okay to have an individual opinion, but there's still so much divisiveness and so much hate in America.
What was the thing that annoyed them most? That you were anti-Trump or that you had an opinion?
Both. As a woman with an opinion and being anti-Trump, it didn't go over well.
And as an athlete as well, because there is this sense that athletes are supposed to athlete, politicians are supposed to be political, and the little people are supposed to go and watch sport and be distracted from the politics. But at the moment, it feels like there's a sea change in what athletes believe they can do.
I'm having a hard time hearing right now. I'm sorry. There's a lot of background noise. But yeah, I mean, if you look at my social media, you'll see a number of comments of people saying, stick to sports, go back to the kitchen, like we still live in the 1800s. But I've learned, you know, I've been a part of a lot of great events, including One Young World, with a lot of global leaders. And I realized recently that it is my duty to do more in the world. It's not to sit back and just be in goal and play soccer and kick a ball around. If we can change the world, it is our duty to attempt to do that and create change and make the world a better place. And I know that I realize that I haven't been doing enough, that I can always do more. And I'm proud that athletes, even though they're not politicians, can do something to affect change in a positive way. And it's our duty as athletes, as politicians, as citizens, as people. It is our duty to do so.
I fully agree. There is a sense that some athletes are given a free pass, that, oh, they're just athletes, they shouldn't be asked about what's happening in politics. And for me, so Rory McIlroy played golf with Donald Trump, and he got some flack for it, and there were also people defending him saying, he's a golfer, he plays golf, he can play golf with who he wants. But ultimately, you're choosing to endorse somebody by playing with them. And you've got to decide you're for something or you're against something, because that's kind of how the world is at the moment. So at what stage did you feel comfortable making your opinions known? Was that a process to become woke?
I was raised by a very strong woman. My grandma was a huge influence in my life. And I knew early on that it's a man's world. I saw it as I grew in the ranks at U.S. Soccer, played for all the youth teams and at every different level. And behind the scenes, I started fighting all of the discrepancies. I started to fight against the quality of hotels, the quality of doctors, the training fields. Anything and everything that I found was not professional to the women's game, I fought for. And I never realized at that point in time that it's what people call today feminism. I don't believe it's feminism. I think it's human rights to have equal rights. So I fought the fight probably by the time I was 14 to 16. And as time went on, I got a louder voice. I had more of a platform. I started fighting harder and harder for women's rights, to be treated great as a professional athlete. And the more I fought, the more it got me in trouble.
I was going to say, if you look at what has happened to Colin Kaepernick ever since he sat first and then ultimately kneels for the national anthem. He's been completely ostracized. So as a 14-year-old to start fights about doctors and hotels and stuff, it's kind of ballsy.
I didn't realize that at the time it was just the right thing to do. We weren't being treated as one of the best teams in the world. And it did get me in trouble. You know, I got fired. At the end of the day, I was one of the biggest advocates for equal pay, which just for background for anybody who isn't American in here, it is U.S. law to pay men and women equally if they have the same job title and the same responsibilities within their job and they work the same amount of hours. So obviously as the men's professional team or the men's U.S. national team and the women's national team with the same employer, we get paid very differently. And I can give you some numbers. In fact, Tim Howard, if anybody knows Tim Howard, he was the goalkeeper for the men's team for quite some time. In his World Cup year, which was in 2014, he played a total of 8 games. In 2015, my World Cup year, the Women's World Cup year, I played a total of 23 games. So 8 games for Tim, 23 games for me. I won a World Cup. I won the award for the best goalkeeper in the world. Tim did not win a World Cup, nor was he considered the best goalkeeper in the world. And he got paid 10% more than me. And that is against U.S. law, it's against the Equal Pay Act, and it's against Title VII.
How do you fix it?
Well, we have a long ways to go. We filed a lawsuit with the government agency, the EEOC, which is the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. We filed going on 2 years ago, maybe a year and a half ago. And we're still waiting to see what happens. But I'm putting my faith into the government agency, into the EEOC, to do the right thing, to abide by law. But at the same time, with the new administration, with Donald Trump, he's not really pressing the issues when it comes to women's equality. So all we can do is continue to take a stance. We have lots of congressmen and congresswomen on our side pushing to make it right at U.S. Soccer. There's a new, I guess the new presidential campaign for U.S. Soccer will be in February. Sunil Gulati right now is the president, who has not been for equal pay. And there's 4 great candidates running. So hopefully when we can change it in the sports world, we hope that it will trickle down into the business world as well.
It seems to me that the biggest area of growth for sports is women's sports, because most sports markets have reached a point of saturation where football in England, for example, has been the Premier League for three decades at this point. Television coverage is everywhere. They've reached a massive global audience. And yet women's sports gets massive figures whenever it's on terrestrial TV. So it doesn't make any sense not to invest in this, to develop it from a social perspective, from a health perspective. Like, I don't really understand why the misogyny of the sports organizations is so overpowering.
Well, we have a lot of intelligent people here at this summit, a lot of CEOs, a lot of people who should realize if you want to get your investment back, then you should invest in the women's game. And the numbers alone will prove that to you. In America, for instance, when you look at television ratings, the biggest television rating for any football game did not go to the men, it went to the women. If you look at the Euro final between Denmark and the Netherlands, they had, I think it was 45,000 people at the game.
Yeah.
Sold out crowd. I mean, the women's game is growing at a very rapid pace. Hopefully we can get FIFA behind it a little bit more. But if you want to invest your money in time, you're going to get it back. So I don't understand why more people aren't investing into the women's game. But I mean, we're getting there. And if you look at across the globe, women footballers are starting to challenge the status quo. They're starting to say, wait a minute, why is this the status quo? Just because these laws and these rules were made by mostly men, why are we going along with it? So you've seen players from Australia, obviously the American team. You've seen players from Brazil, some of the top players from Brazil who went on strike against their federation because of, sexism as well as a lack of support and pay. Who else? Denmark.
The Irish.
Yeah, so there's been a number of teams, and It's just a starting point, but in time, I think it will change.
Did you know that you were going to be at the forefront of that movement when you guys stood up and decided that you wanted this? Like, did you realize that you were part of a global network of
Um, yeah, I mean, we're the #1 team in the world. We get paid more than any other team in the world. So if the American team can't do it, who can? You know, you have to have leaders in the sport taking charge. It is not easy. I did have the loudest voice, and therefore I got fired. I dedicated my life to the game. I dedicated my life to being the best goalkeeper I could be. I helped our country win gold medals. We won a World Cup. I was still, when I got fired, the best goalkeeper in the world. And what I've learned throughout this last year now is, in order to create change, you can't just talk about it. You have to make sacrifices. And I made sacrifices, and I'm continuing to make those sacrifices, but we need other players to make those sacrifices. Even in America, we need more players to make sacrifices, like the Brazil players did who went on strike.
It seems to me that you might not have been fully aware of that 10 years ago, that you kind of have to get to this process, that somebody needs to help everybody along the way. There needs to be a kind of a turning point where you go, I'm mad as hell, I'm not going to take this anymore. What was the tipping point for you?
The tipping point. Like I said, I always battled these issues behind the scenes. I'm not sure what the one tipping point was. I've been part of 3 different CBA negotiations. Multiple times we would tell Sunil Gulati and all of the board at US Soccer, we said, hey, we want to get paid like the men get paid. And they said, no, because you're not deserving of it. Well, let me tell you the numbers here. In 2015, the men's national team had a loss of $2 million. The same year, the women's team brought in close to $20 million for the federation. That's insane. You want to talk about where's the women games going? We brought in close to $20 million for the federation while the men lost $2 million. In 2016, on ticket sales alone, the women had a surplus of $5 million for the federation while the men lost $1 million in 2016. I don't know where the tipping point was, but as time went on and I saw the numbers and I saw the statistics and you see the facts, I got angry. I got mad, and we should be mad, and it's okay to be angry. Everyone says, oh, you know, Hope's just a loudmouth, or Hope's just angry all the time. Well, hell yeah, I'm angry because they're not abiding by U.S. law. And I will do what it takes to fight against that.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. Like, again, alienating your players who are the cash cow for the whole sport doesn't make any sense. We've seen it as well with the Houston Texans owner just last week when he said that the prisoners can't run the prison. So it doesn't seem as if that relationship between sports organizations and their players really works unless there's a proper equal footing. Do the women's team need to go on strike? Is that where this needs to go?
I think there's a lot of options. Right now, maybe that option is on the table down the road. It's been on the table. That option's been on the table for a number of years. We decided to try to negotiate with U.S. Soccer in an amicable way. It didn't work. We got bullied the entire time, and that's why we had to file the lawsuit. So right now, we are just hoping that the EEOC will rule in our favor. But who knows? Strike, I've seen, does work, and I do hope that it works for other federations.
I hope you talked about the fact that you've been labeled by people for standing up for stuff in your past. What advice would you have to somebody who was going to be an advocate for change, now knowing everything you know? Like, is there a specific way of doing things in retrospect that you would do? Like, would you try and lead a strike as a 26-year-old now, for example? Or if you could have that time again? Or what have you learned?
Oh, I've learned a lot. I know that we have to fight for our basic rights. We have to fight to even enforce law, you have to fight for that. Because the law, the Equal Pay Act and Title VII was passed by John F. Kennedy in 1962 or 3. I mean, that's 60 plus years ago, and nobody is there to enforce the law. So I'm learning a lot that just because the law exists, it doesn't mean that anybody is abiding by it. So you have to find somebody to enforce that law. I've learned that if you challenge the status quo, you do have labels. people label you, people call you a rebel or rebellious or a loudmouth. And I finally, and that used to hurt. I mean, it would hurt to be called a loudmouth, because actually I'm a very shy person inside. But I'm passionate about these issues, these social issues, and that's okay to be passionate. I've been passionate in my entire career, and it helped make me successful and be at the top of my career. So I believe in instilling passion and running with that, but it used to hurt to be labeled all the time. And now I say, you know what? Be rebellious. If there are people who aren't rebellious, and people are not going to challenge the status quo, and then we're going to remain in the same environment that we have right now. So the people that change the world are the people who are rebellions. So label me a rebellious now, because I actually I consider it a compliment.
Is that something as well that you have to be mature enough? Like, this is a stage of your career where you have won 2 Olympics, you have been the best goalkeeper in the world in the World Cup, that maybe you need to be secure enough to take that stand, that actually if you're a reserve goalkeeper and you make the stand, you just get pushed to the side?
Well, even if you're secure and confident in your skill set, you can still get pushed to the side. Look what happened to me. I'm fired. I won't have the opportunity to play in the 2019 World Cup, which is in France, which is going to be a beautiful World Cup for the women on beautiful grass fields in a very soccer intelligent country. So I'm still saddened by all of it, even though I'm confident with my skill set on the field. I don't know. I mean, I would be lying if I said it doesn't hurt. But even though it hurts, I take steps forward every single day to right those issues, and that's what keeps me going.
Just if anybody doesn't know, you were playing in a World Cup match and you were critical of the opposition, called them cowards, and then got fired and suspended for 6 months. It's the type of thing that Jose Mourinho says after every game, and people go, ha ha ha, that's kind of funny. There was a massive overreaction to your comments. So clearly they were waiting for you. They were waiting for you to step out of line, and they hit you with it.
Absolutely. You see men all the time across the world make comments in post-game interviews that are, similar to saying the opponent we played are cowards or just being poor sports. It happens. We're angry after games. We're passionate about winning. And I always say, I'd rather care about winning than just going into the locker room and going to party in Rio like I saw many of my teammates do. I was pissed, and I'm never going to apologize for being pissed. And the thing that's important, though, is I never wanted to disrespect my opponents. I have several great friends who play on the Swedish side. I played in Sweden early on in my career. And the first thing I did after the game when I got back to the hotel was I went to the captain, who I know quite well, and I said, Lota, I didn't mean to disrespect you. I don't believe you guys are cowards. I just thought your style of play was very cowardly because it was all defensive. And she said to me, she goes, oh, Hope, don't even worry about it. We never would have beat the number 1 team in the world had we not played defense. So even she knew it was a very defensive style of game. And that doesn't, to me, that goes against the Olympic spirit. You play in the Olympics to win, to bring your best football for the fans, for your country, for yourself, for your family. You want to represent everything that's best and good in the game. So when a team sits back on defense, when they have one of the best strikers in the entire world, who I wanted her to come after me so I could possibly stop her shots, you wanted like this exciting game. That's the spirit of the Olympics. So after the Olympics, people said, I didn't have the spirit of the Olympic Games because I wanted to win.
I'm from Ireland, so, we don't really play very much attacking football. But you wouldn't like the way we play football at all. But the point is that there was a massive overreaction to your comments because of the stuff that you'd done previously. This was just their excuse to go, we've got her now, even though they really didn't in the end.
Let me ask you this. You said that I got fired and suspended for 6 months. How does that even work? You don't suspend somebody and fire them. It's either one or the other. So it was really confusing to the general public, but the media ran with it, and the media said I was only suspended for 6 months. I lost my health insurance. I got severance pay. I never saw the field again. It was a firing, but because they knew it was going to be, or it was an overreaction, they basically told the media, before I even knew I was fired, they leaked it to the media, that Solo is suspended for 6 months. And people still say that. I wasn't suspended, I was fired.
Right. It's ridiculous.
It's absurd.
And so, is that the end of your career? Like, do you feel that that is? Will you be able to come back and play again? Because you've had a shoulder reconstruction in the meantime.
As long as Sunil Gulati is there, as long as the federation continues to treat the women poorly, I decide not to go back to them.
Well, can I make a case that actually you can do more for that team now outside as an advocate from the outside, being a voice of reason and criticism?
I would agree with you that the handcuffs have been removed from my employer. And I think they thought they could fire me and silence me. But in retrospect, they're probably regretting it because, one, they need a great goalkeeper and some leadership on the team. And two, I've been louder and louder and louder to fight for women's rights and to fight against the federation.
So the other aspect of that is that we talk about this a lot in sports, that sports people's athletic identity is so entrenched with their core of their being, and to have that ripped away so quickly and so cruelly is very difficult for anybody to deal with. Is your activism a response to that, a way to kind of feed your competitive instincts?
Well, as I told you earlier, my activism started at a young age without really understanding why, other than I saw the discrepancies and I didn't think it was right, but I couldn't put the word to it, whether feminist or equal pay or Title VII. So I think it started early. But it's been hard. I mean, this year has been very strange. I've committed my life to the game of football, and then suddenly it's been stripped away. And, you know, I have a great support system in place. A lot of people wanted me to go back for a retirement game or to go back and play overseas. And I'm really proud that I didn't just do that just to have this, like, a few claps from the fans and then send me on my way. I got fired, and that's how it's going to remain until somebody does something about it in terms of having the right president, changing the women's game equal to the men's game. Until that happens, I won't go back to the field.
And you do want to stay involved in football. Like, so I guess I'm looking at the trends in American sport at the moment, and you look at how Kaepernick gets blackballed for protesting, and there's a chance that might happen to you in the World Game. Or there's the flip side alternative that they go, it would be much better to have Hope Solo on the inside here, shouting about how great the game is and advocating for us, rather than on the outside, constantly giving a shit for rightly what we've done.
Well, it's really only been the United States and in America that I've been kind of ostracized from the football world. I'd like to thank all of the European football clubs who have come to my support, who have offered me great contracts to go overseas to play. I have a lot of support from around the globe, but not within U.S. soccer or within America or even American media. And I think it just goes to show how powerful they are, because they have a lot of money. They have a lot of commercial advertisements. You know, Nike is one of their biggest influencers. So they know what they're doing in America, but it's really hard right now to get myself back into the American football world. But on a global stage, I know I'm making a difference. And I've been meeting with players from across the globe on what they can do within their own federations to change the global game. So I'm still involved with football.
It strikes me as so stupid, because you could really be someone who inspires kids to go out and play. Like, the rest of the world, I think, has this perception of football in America, soccer in America, being a very middle-class sport. The soccer moms was a whole demographic targeted by George W. Bush. But actually, soccer is a working-class sport all around the world. And America has this massive working class, which is going to be a brilliant breeding ground for world-class footballers. It's got a beautiful mix of ethnicities, where you just know that if that's harnessed properly, soccer in America is going to explode. And you could be so easily part of that. And they're like, no, sorry, you complained too much. We don't want you to be part of this.
Well, the trend in America right now, I'm afraid, isn't necessarily the working class that makes it to the top. It's the players that came from very rich clubs who have a lot of fees to pay. So a lot of blue-collar workers can't afford to send their young girls or young boys to play at the top clubs. You don't see any national team players from the state of Hawaii. and many other states as well that don't have these huge clubs like the teams in California and Seattle and Texas.
It can be
the
thousands.
East Coast.
It can be thousands of dollars to send your kids to play football, to play soccer in America.
It's become that way, I'm afraid, and that's what needs to change in the entire organization to get more influence, to get racial equality, income equality. It's not there right now. A lot of the top players are from the top clubs who come from families with more money. So it's unfortunate because there are a lot of great football players in clubs in Las Vegas, in clubs in Ohio, that you'll never see. And also there's a problem with having a lack of ethnicity on the top teams. So there's a lot of issues we're dealing with that maybe the general public doesn't see outside of winning World Cups for the women. The men didn't qualify for the World Cup. So there's a lot of changes that need to take place within U.S. soccer.
Yeah, completely. So the last point on this before we send everybody off to lunch, you would definitely advise young athletes to stand up and be counted and to make their voices heard?
Yes, of course. I'm a strong believer that you cannot create change in the world by being silent.
Ladies and gentlemen, Hope Solo.
Thank you.
Good
I'm
stuff.
having a hard time hearing you. I'm so sorry.
All right, that's the end of the morning session. We'll see you again this afternoon. Thanks very much. Enjoy your